Hi, it's Sunday, August 4th, and this is today's video on Tropical Storm Debby. As is always the case in these videos, the thoughts expressed here are just mine, and if you're going to make any decisions ahead of the storm, look towards your local National Weather Service office, local emergency management, and the National Hurricane Center for the best information local to you. We've got Tropical Storm Debby this morning and afternoon in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, moving its way north towards the Florida Big Bend region, but we're already feeling impacts along the Florida Peninsula. You can see on Tampa radar, we've got this large band of heavy rainfall pushing across really the entire western half of the Florida Peninsula, and this is bringing lots of heavy rain, which can easily lead to flooding issues. But the other aspect of this is we're on this northwestern quadrant of the storm, which is historically the best place to get tornadoes out of these outer bands, and we could absolutely have some of those in these outer bands as they move north. So for those along the Florida west coast, make sure you're staying closely tuned to any tornado warnings that may be issued, but also flood warnings if they are issued for your area. The main focus is further west as we have the core of Tropical Storm Debby sitting a couple hundred miles west-southwest of Tampa this afternoon. And you can see that right now the system is not fully organized to become a hurricane yet. It's getting there. We're seeing increased rotation, more compact rotation in the center, but we don't have a full-fledged eye wall at this time, at least on radar imagery. And if we look at the visible imagery, we can see a similar type of deal. We've got convection wrapping to the south, but on the south side of the center, we have a little bit of dry air that may be getting entrained into the system, and that is perhaps keeping the system from getting an eye wall, at least for now. Now, the system has been improving this morning. If you look at the recon data that we've had out of an Air Force plane this morning, we can see the improvements we've had. You can see in the first pass, which is this one here, they first found fairly weak and fairly broad circulation south of all the convection, but now, since then, we've had the system get rid of this center, and now we've got a more compact, concentrated low underneath the convection, and also this is underneath the mid-level center, as you can see in the most apparent rotation in the visible satellite imagery. The mid-level center is likely around here. And this is a good step for the storm. This is a necessary step it needs to take to be able to intensify, as now these centers are no longer decoupled, they're no longer separated. We now have that convection right over that low-level center, and we're now seeing wind increases and pressure decreases as a result of that stacking. And this type of pattern is exactly what models have anticipated over the past couple of days, and this should allow the system to intensify further. It's currently with winds of about 65 miles per hour. I believe the current NHC forecast is for it to intensify to a hurricane with winds of 80 or 85 miles per hour before it comes into the Big Bend region of Florida sometime tomorrow morning, at least on the current timing of things. Now, the environment's going to remain fairly favorable. If we look at the water vapor imagery, you can see we have an expansive upper level high sitting directly over the system. Now, this may impart some shear as we get towards landfall. You can see if we look at the upper level winds from the GFS as the system is approaching the Big Bend region, so this is tonight, you can see that we've got this trough over the southern United States, and this is suppressing the ridge's northward extent aloft. So it can't get as far north as a storm is getting. So we get this fetch of some westerly flow over the system as it approaches the coastline of Florida. Now, this shear is not forecast to be all too much. Most soundings show this being low to moderate values, that being, 10, 15 knots, maybe in some higher cases around 20 knots. But that type of shear is not fully inhibitive, and a storm can absolutely still intensify in the face of that shear. Now, the hope would be that maybe we can get the shear to push in some more dry air. You can see on water vapor, maybe an indication of what's going on the south side right now. We've got drier air off towards the west, and the shear could act as a forcing mechanism to push that dry air into the center of the storm. And that could disrupt the system's intensification if it did get in there. But regardless, we are still expecting intensification. This is still likely to be a hurricane as it comes into the Florida Big Bend region And you can see on this model, it comes in tomorrow morning. This would be about 8 a.m. local time. Now, this is the current HASS model showing you that intensification. You can see right now it's sitting generally west of Tampa. We don't really have the inner core built, but as we go in time, it gets that structure built more by tonight. And once it does that, it really starts to ramp up. We get some more pressure falls and we get winds about 80 miles per hour on this model run as it comes into the Big Bend region of Florida for landfall. And that's generally what the National Hurricane Center forecast does expect for this time. Now, this is the current 5-day forecast from the NHC, and we're going to talk about the rest of this track in just a moment, but I want to first focus on Florida because we do have a significant surge threat for the Big Bend region. The unfortunate thing about the Big Bend region is it's very susceptible to storm surge impact. You don't need, an Idalia like last year to have very significant storm surge. Even though this system is, yes, forecast to be a Category 1 hurricane, and maybe a minimal one at that when it comes ashore, we could still have a lot of storm surge coming into the Big Bend region. You can see here on the forecast from the NHC, we're expecting some regions in the Big Bend region to have 6 to 10 feet of storm surge inundation above normally dry ground, and that could absolutely cause issues for areas that are just along the coast. I know we've had mandatory evacuations already issued, I think a couple days ago even, for parts of the Florida Big Bend region. And if you are still watching a storm in the Big Bend region and you're on the coast and you're under an evacuation order and you're thinking you can ride it out, my best advice is just don't chance it. Water is something you just don't want to ever just discount with tropical cyclones. It is the #1 leading cause of fatalities in hurricanes, and it's just better to be safe and move away from the coast, especially because we also have the issue of heavy rainfall across this region as well. If we look at the current rainfall forecast from the Weather Prediction Center, we're expecting 12 to 16 inches of rainfall along the Big Bend region. And if the water tries to go down to the Gulf of Mexico through, say, some rivers, it can't really get there because you have 6 to 10 feet of storm surge at the coastline and moving parts of inland. So you kind of got this convergence zone of all that water runoff from the freshwater flooding meeting the storm surge water, and that can cause a lot of big flooding issues in that entire area along the Big Bend region, and even points further southeast as well. You can see Tampa Bay. 3 to 5 feet of storm surge inundation is expected here as the system does continue to push north. So this is a very significant storm for Florida, even though we're only looking at only a Category 1 hurricane. That's why one of my best advices I give is don't just see it only as a Category 1. Even a tropical storm can be catastrophic in ways, and unfortunately we may be seeing the start of what could be a catastrophic tropical storm for the southeastern United States after landfall in Florida. I'm going to show you the steering pattern as the system comes into Florida tomorrow morning. And we've talked about this before, but the general idea is the steering currents are forecast to sort of collapse for the system once it gets ashore. Now, right now we have this trough over the eastern United States. This is what's helping usher it into the Florida Big Bend region as we go throughout the next day. Now, this trough is quickly exiting the scene. You can see by tomorrow morning, it's already well off the U.S. East Coast and now south of Nova Scotia and Canada. And behind it, we're getting this ridge over the central United States to nose back in here over the eastern U.S. And this is now imparting a little bit more northerly flow over the system. Now, right now, we don't expect the system to fully stall before landfall. It looks like it will still have enough momentum to keep going before it actually, makes landfall. And we're not expecting this to stall offshore like some models had anticipated, say, a few days ago. But it is forecast to slow down. I'm showing you this. This is Monday morning, 8 a.m. I'll go to Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. It's just entered Georgia by this time, just southwest of Savannah. And if we go to Wednesday morning, it's just off the coast of Savannah, south of Charleston. And then, by Thursday morning, or Friday morning, this would be, we're back over Georgia. And this is very concerning because we're going to be getting, as we have the system really stall out here, a ton of deep tropical moisture being just pulled over this part of the US in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. And even though the system is not forecast to intensify again, as it's forecast to stay inland, even as a tropical storm, this amount of moisture being brought into this part of the coast can easily lead to a lot of rainfall over this entire area, as you saw on the the Weather Prediction Center forecast. And I'll reload this to make sure we have the updated one, and we do. You can see this pink here. That is 20 to 30 inches of rainfall for areas, from Savannah to Charleston, South Carolina. And this part of the coast especially is very susceptible to flooding issues. It's a low country of South Carolina. We have a lot of swamp lands here, and especially in cities like Charleston, it can flood very easily from even less than an inch of rainfall. But you're talking about, dumping 20 or 30 inches of rainfall over here. And the National Weather Service has some pretty strong wording on this. They say, quote, historic levels of rainfall and potentially catastrophic flooding from this event. And you can see even outside of that pink area, we could have widespread 12 to 16 inches of rainfall along the entire Georgia and South Carolina coastline. And this is turning out to be, a very, very significant situation for this part of the coast. The other big issue is we're also expecting storm surge as the system comes ashore. As we have an area of low pressure here, it's going to be pulling winds ashore along the South Carolina and Georgia coastline. Now, we're not expecting, say, 6 to 10 feet like in Florida, but still, any water rise here is going to have the same effect that I talked about in the Florida Big Bend region. The water that falls here inland is going to try to go to the ocean, but it can't because you're getting all this water sitting here 2 to 4 feet above normally dry ground at the coast. So you get this convergence zone, and that could cause a lot of flooding issues for a lot of the islands that we have along the South Carolina and Georgia coastline. And you can see outlined in the Weather Prediction Center excessive rainfall outlook, which is basically outlining the potential of flash flooding. You can see they have issued a high risk. This is the highest they can go, level 4 of 4 here for coastal South Carolina from about Myrtle Beach down to Savannah and Georgia. And even outside of that, we have a moderate risk, level 3 of 4 from the Big Bend region of Florida all the way up to Wilmington and North Carolina. So this is turning out to be a very significant event, and you can see in the key messages here from Tropical Storm Debby. Again, we could be seeing, quote, potentially historic heavy rainfall across the southeast parts of Georgia and South Carolina through Friday morning. And we could also be looking at areas of catastrophic flooding occurring here. And this is certainly something to take very seriously if you're watching from South Carolina or Georgia. Make sure you're listening to your local National Weather Service offices and the National Hurricane Center so you know exactly what to do ahead of the storm. And if any evacuations or orders are issued, make sure you heed those. The effects from water are not one to underestimate. Water is a powerful force, and like I said earlier, it is the #1 fatality-causing impact of hurricanes. And it's just best to stay safe and not hold back and stay back when you have impacts like this from a tropical system. I'll leave links to local National Weather Service offices throughout the Southeast at the top of the description alongside the National Hurricane Center page. We do have one other system to watch in the Atlantic at this time. It's not really worth going into much detail right now, but it is a tropical wave that we've got approaching the Lesser Antilles Islands. The system has a low chance of developing. It does look pretty good on satellite right now, but it is about to enter the Caribbean where we have some stronger trade winds, and that will likely limit intensification or development of the system in the short term, but it still could develop as it moves through these islands. And regardless of development, we're forecast to have some stronger winds and heavy rainfall in the Leeward Islands and Lesser Antilles as it moves through. But it's going to continue pushing into the Western Caribbean, and guidance does show an increased potential once it does get into the Western Caribbean, past the strong trade winds for increased development. And as this does progress, we'll talk about it more if we need to. But just keep an eye on it if you're in, Hispaniola, Jamaica, Central America, as it will be coming your way as it goes throughout the next week. that's all that I've got for today. Again, stay safe in Florida and Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina as Debbie moves through. I'll have maybe another video tomorrow, depending on how the forecast looks for this, as it comes offshore into the Atlantic. If we don't expect much intensification offshore, I may not make many videos. I'll just keep some posts on Twitter, as I really focus on the forecasting phase of intensification and track. I don't really focus on the rainfall forecasts for these storms. But again, stay safe, and I will leave again links to local National Weather Service offices and the National Hurricane Center at the top of the description. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.